Coming live from the Tivoli Met Radio studio here on Auraria campus, this is All Sports with Gerardo. Thank you for listening to All Sports through Met Radio on mymetmedia.com, live every Thursday from 3:30 to 5 p.m. This is your host, Gerardo, and all I talk is sports. On the show today, I am going to talk about NFL football, Major League Baseball, NBA basketball, and college football. So before I start the show, I hope you all had a great week. To start off with Major League Baseball, on Sunday, September 1st, Justin Verlander threw his third career no-hitter against the Blue Jays up in Toronto. In 9 innings, Justin Verlander threw 120 pitches. He allowed 0 hits. He striked out 14 hitters, and this was his second time Justin Verlander threw a no-hitter against the Blue Jays. Justin Verlander joins Cy Young, Larry Corgan, Bob Feller, Sandy Koufax, and Nolan Ryan as the only pitchers to throw 3 or more no-hitters during their career. So I want to say congrats to Justin Verlander on throwing his third career no-hitter. We're going to have to wait and see if he can throw another no-hitter or a few more for the rest of his career. We're going to have to wait and see, but now Justin Verlander is in elite company, and he joins all these great pitchers that have thrown 3 or more no-hitters throughout their career. Pete Alonso, Mike Trout, Cody Bellinger, Christian Yelich, and Ignacio Suarez have hit 40 or more home runs this season. So looking at this list, currently Pete Alonso has hit 45 home runs. Mike Trout has also hit 45 home runs. Cody Bellinger has hit 42 home runs. Christian Yelich has hit 41 home runs. And Ignacio Suarez has hit 40 home runs. We now have 5 individual players in Major League Baseball, in the American League, and in the National League that have hit 40 or more home runs this season. We still have 1 month left of regular season baseball, which is September. So we're going to have to wait and see how many more home runs these 5 players hit. But there's no doubt that some of these players, or all 5 of these players, are going to hit over 50 home runs. And I could definitely see Pete Alonso and Mike Trout hitting 50 or more home runs by the time the end of the season comes around the corner at the end of September. Now looking at the race for MVP in the American League and in the National League, to start off with the American League, these are the 3 contenders: Mike Trout, Alex Bregman, and Rafael Devers. Looking at these 3 possible candidates, Mike Trout would definitely be the front runner. He's been having a great season. He has hit over 40 home runs this season. And we all know who Mike Trout is and what Mike Trout can do on the field, whether he's in the outfield or he's at the plate batting. But don't count out Alex Bregman and Rafael Devers. Now for the race for MVP in the National League, these are the 3 contenders: Cody Bellinger, Christian Yelich, and Ronald Acuna Jr. Now, the winner of the National League MVP is definitely going to be very interesting. These are 3 possible candidates, and it's definitely going to come down to the end of the regular season and what team advances further in the playoffs. And since the Dodgers, the Brewers, and the Braves are all going to be teams playing in the postseason, these 3 teams are definitely going to be contending teams. And they're going to be playing in the postseason in October. So Cody Bellinger and the Dodgers Christian Yelich and the Brewers, and Ronald Acuna Jr. and the Braves, you're going to see these three individual players and these three teams in the postseason. Now, looking at the candidates for MVP for the National League, I would definitely say it's going to come down to Cody Bellinger or Christian Yelich. It's going to be a very tight race. And the way I see this individual player winning MVP for the National League, it's going to depend on what team plays better and what team advances further into the postseason, especially if they reach the World Series and they win the World Series. But if I were to give a solid guess as to who's going to win MVP in the National League, I would say it's going to be Cody Bellinger. So right now I'm going to update you with the current Rockies schedule from this past week, and I'm also going to tell you who the Rockies go against in the next week. So to start off, in the last week of August, after the Rockies had an interleague matchup against the Boston Red Sox here at Coors Field during the week, which was a 2-game series against the Red Sox, the Rockies finish off their homestand this past weekend against the Pirates, which was a 4-game series to finish off August. In the first game, the Rockies lost the game 8-11. In the second game, the Rockies lost the game 4-9. In the third game, the Rockies lost the game 4-11. And in the final game of the series, the Rockies lost the game 2-6. So overall, the Pirates did come into Coors Field and sweep the Rockies in a 4-game series. To finish off August, the Rockies went against the Pirates in a 4-game series, which continued on into September on September 1st. Now that the Rockies are in the final month of regular season baseball, in the first week of September, the Rockies hit the road and started their 6-game road trip by heading down to California. And to start off this road trip, the Rockies went to Los Angeles to have a divisional matchup against their divisional rival, the Dodgers, at Dodger Stadium. In the first game, the Rockies lost the game 9-16. In the second game, the Rockies lost the game 3-5. And in the final game of the series, the Rockies lost the game 3-7. So overall, the Dodgers were able to sweep the Rockies at Dodger Stadium. For these last few weeks, it has not been looking good for the Rockies, whether they've been playing here at Coors Field or on the road. The Rockies have not been able to win their last 9 games. Now, going back to the last week of August, the Red Sox beat the Rockies in a 2-game series here at Coors Field. The Pirates came into Coors Field and had a 4-game series against the Rockies. They swept the Rockies. The Rockies went on the road down to Los Angeles to go against the Dodgers. And the Dodgers swept the Rockies at Dodger Stadium. Now, going back to August, the Rockies have not been able to win a game since August 26th, when the Rockies went against the Braves here at Coors Field, which was actually a makeup game from the first time the Braves came to Coors Field back in April, which was a 3-game series. But if the Rockies didn't win this makeup game against the Braves 3-1, the last time the Rockies probably would have won was on August 21st in the last game of the Diamondbacks series down in Arizona. How the Rockies were able to pull off a win against the Braves, it was amazing. But before that, the weekend before, the Rockies had a 4-game series against the Cardinals up in St. Louis, and they got swept by the Cardinals. So for these last few weeks, whether the Rockies have been here at Coors Field or on the road, they haven't been able to win games. So hopefully this weekend, when the Rockies go against the Padres in a 3-game series, the Rockies can turn it around and try to win one of these games. So this weekend, the Rockies continue their road trip down to San Diego, and they have a 3-game series against their divisional rival, the Padres, down in San Diego. So hopefully the Rockies can win one of these games or all of these games. Then the following week, the Rockies return back to Coors Field to start their 9-game homestand here at Coors Field. During the week, the Rockies will go against the Cardinals here at Coors Field in the 3-game series. So hopefully, when the Rockies return back from San Diego and they win one of the games or some of the games, the Rockies can return back here to Coors Field and try to win some games during this 9-game homestand. But hopefully, they can try to win a game against the Cardinals in a 3-game series during the week. So that's the current Rockies schedule of the final scores and the teams the Rockies went against this past week and who the Rockies go against in the next week. So right now I'm going to update you with the current Major League Baseball standings and the playoff picture in the American and National League. To start off in the American League, looking at the playoff picture in the American League East, right now the Yankees are leading this division. In the American League Central, right now the Twins are leading this division. And in the American League West, right now the Astros are leading this division. Now looking at the American League wild card race, this is definitely going to be interesting, and it can come down to the end of the regular season. In the first wild card spot, the Rays currently have this spot, and they're half a game up from the Athletics, and the Athletics are currently in the second spot. And right behind the Athletics are the Indians, but don't count out the Indians, they're only half a game back. In the National League, looking at the playoff picture in the National League, in the National League East, right now the Braves are leading this division. In the National League Central, right now the Cardinals are leading this division. But the Cubs, they're only 3 games back from the Cardinals in the National League Central. And in the National League West, right now the Dodgers are leading this division. In the National League Wild Card, looking at the National League Wild Card race, in the first spot, right now the Nationals have a 3-game lead, and they're currently in the first spot. And in the second spot is the Cubs. They're currently holding on to the second spot. But the National League Wild Card race is definitely going to be very competitive, and it can come down to the end of the season. Right behind the Cubs is the Diamondbacks by 3 games, the Phillies by 3.5 games, the Brewers by 4 games, and the Mets by 4.5 games. So for the National League Wild Card, whatever teams play great, whatever teams win the most games, whatever teams go on a winning streak, those will be the 2 teams that will be your National League wildcard teams. Now, if one of these teams don't play great or they go on a losing streak, they're going to fall behind. And since there's only a few weeks left, and we're now in the final month of regular season baseball, since it's September, if these teams don't play great, they're going to be left out of the wild card race, and be eliminated from playoff contention. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens in the next week and for the rest of the season in the American League and in the National League for the teams contending to be a part of the postseason in October. So it's definitely going to be interesting. And going into next week, these are the two things you definitely want to watch out for: the American League wildcard race and the National League wildcard race. But this is currently the postseason picture for 2019. And these are the teams that are contending for a playoff spot for the postseason in October. So that's the current Major League Baseball standings and playoff picture in the American and National League. In the Major League Baseball power rankings, the current top 10 Major League Baseball teams are the Astros, Yankees, Dodgers, Twins, Braves, Nationals, Athletics, Rays, Cardinals, and Indians. Going into next week, these are the 10 teams you definitely want to keep an eye out on. Especially that all these teams are contending for a playoff spot in the American and National League. Right now I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I will talk about the NFL. Welcome back to All Sports with Gerardo. Moving on now to NFL football. Ezekiel Elliott and the Cowboys have agreed to a 6-year contract extension, which makes him the highest paid running back in the NFL. Now for Ezekiel Elliott, he started his holdout back when training camp began, back in late July. And this holdout continued until the week before the regular season begins. On Wednesday, September 4th, Ezekiel Elliott returned back to the Cowboys facility, ready to practice for the 2019 season, which begins this weekend. So it's great to see that Ezekiel Elliott is back with the Cowboys. He's back at the Cowboys facility, practicing, getting ready, and preparing for the 2019 season. Since the Cowboys haven't seen Ezekiel Elliott during the preseason and during training camp, which began back in late July, we're going to have to wait and see how Ezekiel Elliott practices in the next few days and prepares for the first game of the regular season, which begins this weekend. And when the Cowboys have their first regular season game this weekend, we're going to have to wait and see how many reps and touches Ezekiel Elliott gets during the game. I'm not sure if Ezekiel Elliott is not going to touch the football that much, or if he's going to touch the football a lot during the first game, since he's been holding out and he hasn't been at the Cowboys facility since training camp. But whether Ezekiel Elliott gets a lot of touches, gets a lot of plays, or he doesn't get a lot of touches or plays, we're going to have to wait and see. Ezekiel Elliott and the Cowboys are happy that Ezekiel Elliott is finally back and that he's getting ready for the 2019 season, which begins this weekend. If Ezekiel Elliott doesn't get a lot of plays in the first regular season game, he will definitely get a lot of plays in the second regular season game and going forward for the rest of the season. But we're going to have to wait and see how Ezekiel Elliott plays in the first regular season game and for the rest of the season. Jared Goff and the Rams have agreed to a 4-year contract extension. Demaryius Thomas and the Patriots have agreed to a 1-year contract. Running back LeSean McCoy and the Chiefs have agreed to a 1-year contract. Cornerback Joe Hayden and the Steelers have agreed to a 2-year contract extension. Quarterback Brian Hoyer and the Colts have agreed to a 3-year contract. Guard Cody Whitehair and the Bears have agreed to a 5-year contract extension. Linebacker Myles Jack and the Jaguars have agreed to a 4-year contract extension. Kicker Matt Bryant and the Falcons have agreed to a 1-year contract. Wide receiver Josh Doctson and the Vikings have agreed to a 1-year contract. Offensive tackle Lamal Collins and the Cowboys have agreed to a 5-year contract extension. Center Mike Pouncey and the Chargers have agreed to a 1-year contract. Quarterback Jacoby Brissett and the Colts have agreed to a 2-year contract. Tight end Tyler Higbee and the Rams have agreed to a 4-year contract extension. The Texans traded Jadeveon Clowney to the Seahawks in exchange for a 3rd-round pick, linebacker Jacob Martin, and Barsonis Mingo. The Texans traded for running back Carlos Hyde from the Chiefs in exchange for offensive tackle Martinez Rankton. The Texans traded for wide receiver Kenny Stills, Laramie Tunsil, a 4th and a 6th-round pick in exchange for 2 first-round picks, a 2nd pick, Johnson Brisomuni, and Julian Davenport. So over the weekend, the Texans were very active. They traded some of their great players away, but they also traded for some really great players, especially on the offensive side. The Texans definitely want to be better on offense, since the Texans have a pretty solid defense. With all these trades that the Texans did over the weekend, the Texans really wanted to improve their offense. They improved their offensive line. They added a wide receiver, so quarterback Deshaun Watson will have another wide receiver to throw to. They also have future draft picks to improve their offense or defense going into the future. So even though the Texans traded Jadeveon Clowney to the Seahawks, it was a great trade for the Texans. The Texans also traded for running back Carlos Hyde to add a running back to the offense. So overall, these 3 big trades that the Texans did over the weekend, they weren't bad trades. Even though the Texans traded Jadeveon Clowney, but they really improved their offense since they added a running back, a wide receiver, and they improved their offensive line. So the Texans have a solid defense, but they should be a lot better on offense. So we're going to have to wait and see how the Texans play this season. But they should definitely be a lot better on offense. The Bills traded center Russell Boulding to the Patriots. The Raiders released linebacker Brandon Marshall. The Panthers released wide receiver Torrey Smith. According to multiple sources, Melvin Gordon will continue his holdout into the regular season until he gets a new contract. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens with this Melvin Gordon situation. But the Chargers have stated that they will not continue talks with the Melvin Gordon contract situation. And if they give Melvin Gordon a new contract, they will not continue those talks until this offseason. The Dolphins announced Ryan Fitzpatrick will be their starting quarterback for the beginning of the regular season. The Broncos and the rest of the NFL teams now have their 53-man roster and their 10-man practice squad. So over the weekend, all 32 teams across the NFL had to trim their rosters down to a 53-man roster, and they also had to have their 10-man practice squad. So all 32 teams in the NFL now have a 53-man roster and a 10-man practice squad going into the regular season. So over the weekend, the Broncos released quarterback Kevin Hogan, safety Sua Cravens, and linebacker Jamal Carter. So the Broncos waived and released many players since they had to trim their roster down to a 53-man roster. Now these names that I just mentioned, these were the big names and the names that stood out since the Broncos released these 3 players this past weekend. But there were many players that the Broncos released over the weekend. But those were the names that stood out. The Broncos claimed quarterback Brandon Allen off waivers. Since the Broncos released quarterback Kevin Hogan, the Broncos needed to add a third quarterback, and Brandon Allen will be their backup quarterback since Drew Lock will be placed on injured reserve to start off the regular season. The Broncos needed a backup quarterback, and that will be Brandon Allen. Brandon Allen was a backup quarterback for the Rams, and during the preseason, Brandon Allen had a great preseason for the Rams, especially when Brandon Allen went against the Broncos, when the Broncos went against the Rams during the preseason down in Los Angeles. Broncos quarterback Drew Lock, running back Theo Riddick, and tight end Jake Butt will be placed on injured reserve for the beginning of the regular season. The Broncos beat the Cardinals 20-7 in their final preseason game on Thursday, August 29th in Denver at Mile High Stadium. This is the 60th season of Denver Broncos football. The Broncos' first regular season game is against the Raiders in Oakland on Monday, September 9th, which is actually a double hitter of a Monday night football game. So the Broncos' first regular season game will be against the Raiders in Oakland. It will be a primetime game and a double hitter game on Monday Night Football. So I'm excited that football is finally back, and the 2019 season is finally beginning this weekend. It's finally September, and football is finally back. It's a great time of year right now, especially with football being finally back, and it's finally the regular season. So now, this is when the games count. So the road to Super Bowl 54 begins this weekend, and all 32 teams are hoping that they can reach the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. So Super Bowl 54 will be this February down in Miami, Florida, and we're going to have to wait and see what 2 teams are playing in Super Bowl 54 and what team wins Super Bowl 54. But this is only the beginning. This is the first week of regular season football. This is also the 100th season of the NFL. So football is finally back. It's a great time of year, and I'm so excited. Football is finally back. This is the beginning of the regular season, and the games finally count now in September and going into December. The 100th season of the NFL begins on Thursday, September 5th. The Packers go against the Bears in an NFC North matchup up in Chicago to kick off the 100th season and the regular season. So it doesn't get any better than that. We got the Packers going against the Bears in an NFC North divisional matchup. Now the Packers going against the Bears goes all the way back a few decades. And there's been a lot of great games between the Packers and the Bears, and there's a lot of history against the Packers and the Bears. So this is a great matchup to kick off the 100th season of the NFL and the regular season. The Packers and Bears definitely have a lot of history, and they want to continue that history going into 2019. So there's no better divisional matchup to kick off the 100th season of the NFL. And the Packers going against the Bears is one of the best rivalries in the NFL and in all of sports. This is the first week of the regular season. So these are the games you want to keep an eye on this week, in the first week of regular season football, since it's the beginning of the 2019 NFL season. So here are the week 1 matchups to keep an eye on this week. The Packers versus the Bears on Thursday Night Football. This is the first game of the 100th season of the NFL, and this is also the first game of the 2019 regular season. You also want to keep an eye out on the Redskins versus the Eagles, the Bills versus the Jets, the Falcons versus the Vikings, the Colts versus the Chargers, the Giants versus the Cowboys, the Steelers versus the Patriots on Sunday Night Football, the Texans versus the Saints on Monday Night Football, which is a double hitter, and the Broncos versus the Raiders on Monday Night Football. The Texans versus the Saints and the Broncos versus the Raiders are the 2 games that will be played on Monday Night Football, and it will also be a double hitter. So those are the games you want to keep an eye out on for week 1 of the regular season. We got a lot of great matchups, and we also have a lot of great divisional matchups. Right now I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I will talk about the NBA and college football. Welcome back to All Sports with Gerardo. Moving on now to NBA basketball. Eric Gordon and the Rockets have agreed to a 4-year max contract extension. Moving on now to college football. Oklahoma quarterback Jalen Hurts had 332 passing yards, 176 rushing yards, 6 touchdowns, and he set a school record for most yards with 508 yards in his Oklahoma debut. So looking at Oklahoma in college football, quarterback Jalen Hurts is one of the players you definitely want to keep an eye on going into the 2019 college football season. You also want to keep an eye out for Oklahoma, since they're going to be one of the best college football teams, and they're going to be in the top 10 rankings and even in the top 4 rankings among college football teams. So Oklahoma should definitely be in the top 4 of college football. Since quarterback Jalen Hurts had a great first game by having all these passing yards, rushing yards, and all those touchdowns, you definitely want to keep an eye out on Jalen Hurts this season in college football. And he's definitely going to be a serious contender to win this year's Heisman Trophy. In the last few years, Oklahoma has had quarterback Baker Mayfield. He won the Heisman Trophy, and he was the first overall pick in the NFL draft. Last year, Oklahoma had quarterback Kyler Murray. He won the Heisman Trophy, and he was the first overall pick in the NFL draft in the last few months. So can Jalen Hurts win this year's Heisman Trophy? Go into the NFL draft in the future and be the first overall pick? We're going to have to wait and see. This is only the beginning of Jalen Hurts for Oklahoma. And in the first game, he definitely looked great. And we're going to have to wait and see how he plays in the next game and for the rest of the college football season. But if Oklahoma had Baker Mayfield win the Heisman Trophy, be the first overall pick in the NFL draft to the Browns, have quarterback Kyler Murray win the Heisman Trophy, and be the first overall pick in the NFL draft to the Cardinals, with Oklahoma having two great quarterbacks in the last few years continue their career from college football into the NFL, we're going to have to wait and see. But after having two great quarterbacks and moving on to another great quarterback, which would be the third quarterback, is third time a charm? Will quarterback Jalen Hurts have a great career of Oklahoma, and can his career continue on into the NFL? We're going to have to wait and see. But Jalen Hurts is definitely going to be a serious contender to win this year's Heisman Trophy. So hopefully, now that Oklahoma has moved on to their third quarterback, Jalen Hurts can win the Heisman Trophy and move on to the NFL, enter the NFL draft, and be the first overall pick in the NFL draft. CU beat CSU 52-31 in the final Rocky Mountain Showdown on Friday, August 30th in Denver at Mile High Stadium. Since 2015, CU has a 5-game winning streak against CSU in the Rocky Mountain Showdown. The 2020 Rocky Mountain Showdown between CU and CSU will be at the CSU campus in Fort Collins, Colorado. So looking at the Rocky Mountain Showdown, the last Rocky Mountain Showdown between CU and CSU at Mile High Stadium in Denver, Colorado was a great game. It was a great atmosphere. Both CU and CSU are looking forward to the 2020 Rocky Mountain Showdown being at the CSU campus in Fort Collins, Colorado, since CSU has a new football stadium. So CU, CSU, and the college football fans of CU and CSU are definitely looking forward to the 2020 Rocky Mountain Showdown being at the CSU campus in Fort Collins, Colorado next year, since CSU has a new stadium. Also, the students at CU and CSU are looking forward to the 2020 Rocky Mountain Showdown between CU and CSU being at the CSU campus in Fort Collins, Colorado. There's no doubt that the CU and CSU students had a great time this past weekend at the 2019 Rocky Mountain Showdown at Mile High Stadium in Denver, Colorado, as they were tailgating and getting ready for the Rocky Mountain Showdown to begin at Mile High Stadium in Denver, Colorado. So looking at the highlights of the 2019 Rocky Mountain Showdown at Mile High Stadium in Denver, Colorado, from tailgating up until the time the game started, during the game, and after the game, there's no doubt that the CU and CSU students had a great time that day, and the CU and CSU fans also had a great time that day. Since the 2019 Rocky Mountain Showdown between CU and CSU was the last Rocky Mountain Showdown at Mile High Stadium in Denver, Colorado, we're now turning the page to a new chapter, and we're looking forward to the 2020 Rocky Mountain Showdown between CU and CSU being played at the CSU campus in Fort Collins, Colorado. After the 2020 Rocky Mountain Showdown between CU and CSU, we're going to have to wait and see what happens going into the future. In the past, the Rocky Mountain Showdown between CU and CSU would be played at the CU Boulder campus and at the CSU Fort Collins campus. And it would alternate between the CU Boulder and the CSU Fort Collins campus every year. We're going to have to wait and see after the 2020 Rocky Mountain Showdown and going into the future if the Rocky Mountain Showdown between CU and CSU will continue. If it does, in the next few years going into the future, when the Rocky Mountain Showdown would return, it would alternate between the CU Boulder and the CSU Fort Collins campus every year. One year the Rocky Mountain Showdown will be played at the CU Boulder campus, and the next year it will be played at the CSU Fort Collins campus, and it would just alternate every year. But we're going to have to wait and see if CU and CSU want to continue the Rocky Mountain Showdown after the 2020 Rocky Mountain Showdown going into the future. So we're going to have to wait and see what's going to happen with the Rocky Mountain Showdown between CU and CSU going into the future. Colorado goes against number 24 Nebraska on Saturday, September 7th up in Boulder, Colorado. This is going to be a great game between Colorado and Nebraska. This rivalry continues. This has been a great rivalry in the past and even now. So I can't wait for another Colorado-Nebraska matchup. This is one of the best rivalries. And this rivalry continues this weekend up in Boulder, Colorado. So I'm definitely looking forward to Colorado going against Nebraska another time. Colorado State goes against Western Illinois on Saturday, September 7th up in Fort Collins, Colorado. This is the second week of college football. So right now, I'm going to tell you the week 1 college football final scores. And I'm also going to tell you the week 2 college football schedule and the games you need to keep an eye on this week. So looking at the college football schedule for week 1, here are the final scores and the highlights from this week. Number 8 Florida beat Miami 24-20. Number 16 Auburn beat number 11 Oregon 27-21. Now looking at the week 2 matchups, these are the games you want to keep an eye on this week. Number 24 Nebraska versus Colorado. Number 12 Texas A&M versus number 1 Clemson. Number 6 LSU versus number 10 Texas. And number 25 Stanford versus USC. So in week 2 of college football, we definitely got some big games. And we got ranked teams going against each other. So those are the matchups you want to keep an eye on for this week in college football. In the week 1 college football AP Top 10 poll, The current top 10 college football teams are Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, Ohio State, LSU, Michigan, Notre Dame, Texas, and Auburn. Right now I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I will talk about the end of the show. Welcome back to All Sports with Gerardo. Moving on now to end the show. What to watch for this week in sports? The 100th season of the NFL begins on Thursday, September 5th. The Packers go against the Bears in a NFC North matchup in Chicago to kick off the 100th season and the regular season. The Broncos' first regular season game is against the Raiders in Oakland on Monday, September 9th. The first week of NFL regular season football, Colorado goes against number 24, Nebraska, on Saturday, September 7, up in Boulder, Colorado. Colorado State goes against Western Illinois on Saturday, September 7, up in Fort Collins, Colorado. Colorado Buffaloes, Colorado State Rams. The second week of college football, Major League Baseball. Moving on now, on the next show, I will talk about NFL football, Major League Baseball, NBA basketball, and college football. I hope you all have a great weekend. Tune in to the next All Sports with Gerardo show next Thursday from 3:30 to 5 p.m. I want to say thank you to everybody that listens to All Sports through Met Radio here on mymetmedia.com. Subscribe or like my pages on social media at All Sports with Gerardo. Until next time, this is Gerardo.